Here is a rundown of the 10 chapters in this book with its wealth of words and video.
Chapter 1, The Look and the Sound.
In Chapter 1, we lay out the basics of how to look and how to sound.
Key point, the audience will not separate content from appearance and presentation. It's a package. If the visuals distract from the communication and messaging, what you say is less likely to be remembered. Chapter 2, Messaging.
In Chapter 2, we dive into messaging, how to craft your messages and prepare your quotes.
Key point. Messaging is really about refined storytelling. Indeed, storytelling is at the core of every successful campaign. Business, political, social media, you name it. Chapter 3, The Media Scrum and Other Q&A Games.
How do you handle being surrounded by media types, professional and amateur, in a media scrum? Well, in this chapter, you'll get the answers.
Key point. Being at the center of a scrum is not an enjoyable experience, but if you prepare and practice your key messaging, you are very likely to emerge unscathed. I will say this over and over again. There is no substitute for preparation and practice. Chapter 4, Rehearse, Rehearse, and Rehearse some more.
The late President Ronald Reagan, dubbed the Great Communicator, rehearsed like the actor he was before he went into politics. Great communicators are made, not born.
Key point, if you don't rehearse, don't present. Not to an interviewer, not to a scrum, not to anyone. Chapter 5, Tell them a story. Lots of stories.
This chapter is about the importance of storytelling.
Key point, you should have at least one story for every messaging point. Stories bring ideas alive. They make them real and relatable. They make you and your messaging memorable. They are powerful. Tell stories. Chapter 6, A chuckle is worth 1,000 words.
You may not be particularly skilled at joke telling, but you can certainly tell a story.
Key point, the surest, quickest way to be funny is to highlight actual funny things that happen in your everyday life. This is much easier than trying to come up with jokes on the spot. Chapter 7, Don't panic. It's just a crisis.
Every crisis is potentially a terrible tragedy, but also an emerging opportunity.
Key point, it is reasonable to assume that a crisis is anything that can seriously harm a reputation or worse. Be prepared to answer questions and provide information even as the crisis unfolds. Chapter 8, Everything you ever wanted to know about media interviews and appearances and might not have asked.
The interview is your chance to take control of the narrative with the help of the interviewer.
Essential advice, be like Oscar Wilde. Prepare for an interview like Oscar Wilde famously prepared for evening social events in 19th century London. Wilde was known to spend the entire day before a dinner party preparing his quips and stories, his messaging, and his quotes. Chapter 9, A Day in the Life, Media Training Day.
The most interesting, valuable, and rewarding thing I do with clients is to help them hone their messaging.
Key point, some very, very smart and successful people often convince themselves that they are smart enough to wing it in an interview. And because they are so smart, they find it difficult to keep their messaging clear, simple, and focused on things that matter to regular folks. Chapter 10, Media Training Day, Sample Agenda, Presentation, Notes and Links.
In this chapter, I present the nuts and bolts of a sample media training day. I take you there.
Key point, every media training session or workshop is unique, customized for the client's needs and particular situation. That said, in this chapter, I share samples of the sorts of materials I bring to a typical workshop.